No, that's just the weekend.
Yeah, that. I don't know if you guys could hear that.
Yeah,
Julie said that was just the weekend.
The wife answered no.
Wow. She just doesn't want me to get in trouble with the safety man.
Yeah, when I grew this beard that I have, I never intended to leave it, but it's so much easier than shaving. It's not a fashion thing, it's a lazy thing.
Exactly. Oh, well, someday I'll be able to be lazy again.
All right.
Oh, darn it. How does she spell her name?
Is it, I shouldn't have renamed the file already, huh? Was that your only copy?
No. Where's my...
Which one? Amy?
All three of them, actually.
Because one of them you have in the contacts thing there.
Yeah, she was the last one I did. I didn't think about that till I did the other two. I can actually email them and say, hey, I told them, I was like, I'll let you know what day we record, and that way they can put them out there.
I'm looking forward to hearing about how the Gooey Kid handled the Neckbeard Paradise.
Oh man, the Gooey Kid was out of his element.
I went to just a plain old science fiction convention in Houston with a friend of mine, and it was like I had dropped into a new planet. It's like I'm not even in the same. I don't speak the same language. I don't nothing. This one was at NASA in Houston, so there was enough hard science stuff because there was a couple of astronauts there, and Chris, what's his name from Wired, was there. So there was enough hard science to keep me interested. But when they were going on about the greatest science fiction vehicle ever made, was it Nautilus or the Batmobile or I don't remember what else, the TARDIS? I'm like, I'll be over here watching videos on my phone. Just let me know when you're done.
I mean, I'm used to being, Grant, my friends around here are really, none of them are geeks. So I'm just the most geeky person around, and there I would be considered a normal noob, and it was weird.
Yeah, you went from super nerd to just, regular guy.
Super nerd to fish out of water. Simpleton.
All right. Are we ready to do this? Everybody ready to record?
Hold on just 1 minute here.
We're light on feedback this week. And I have very little to say at the beginning of the show. And we're gonna have to work to put the ad in there somewhere.
Oh no, we got a great story that leads into the ad. If you'll see, I put it in the body of the ad.
Okay.
So whenever you want to cut to the ad, you just do that top story, and I can take it from there.
The top story?
In the ad.
The top story in the ad. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, I decided, by the way, I hadn't told you, but you're going to do the ad this week. Since you always do an ad after I do the ad. Who is it I was talking to? Aaron doesn't listen to the show, or at least not very often. Asked me the other day, so how's the show going? I said, yeah, we're doing fine. He said, still doing a 20-minute ad for Linux Academy? I said, yeah, pretty much. He said, Seth, still doing another 15 minutes after that? Yeah, pretty much. They get their value.
That's right.
I used to complain about Leo's ads, and I was listening to one show recently. I don't remember which one it was, but he did 26 minutes of ad time. They did an ad for, I don't remember what it was. It was like 10 minutes, and then they had a discussion, and then somebody called back to the ad, and they started talking about it again. And then between like 3 segments, this one sir sponsor got over 20 minutes of airtime. It was maybe the shave guy or maybe the snack thing. I think that's what it was.
Oh, okay.
Because they kept calling back to food, and he'd grab his box of I can't remember, Nature or something.
Yeah, it's I know the name of it. We're not live. Oh, we're live. Maybe I shouldn't say their name then.
No, it's fine. I just couldn't remember the name of it.
Nature Box.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like, Steve Gibson. He'll do ads for people that aren't even sponsors of the show.
We do that all the time.
Like Harry's.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I mean, obviously, 26 minutes is a classic Mark exaggeration, but it was a long time between the multiple conversations. And I used to get frustrated with particularly his Audible ads, where they'd go on and 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 on, and then we started doing ads, and we go on and on and on and on and on and on. And I thought, okay, now I understand.
Yeah, the Everyday Linux ad box. That's what we should change our name to. The non-Linux ad box show.
Yeah.
That just has a ring.
Well, I mean, I hope at some point we get another advertiser or two, at which point we're going to have to dial back because we can't give everybody 20 minutes in an hour show.
Right.
Oh, before we go on, do you want to talk? Do you want me to, I have a few potential guests coming up. Do you want me to talk about that during the show, or do you want to just talk about it now?
What do you think?
That's a tough one.
I'm looking at these notes. This is already going to be a long show.
Yeah.
So let's discuss it before we hit record.
Okay. So I'm hopefully to get somebody from the Electronic Frontier Foundation on.
Awesome. Yeah, well, you've been trying that one for a while. It's been a scheduling thing.
I talked to somebody at the booth, and then somebody from the actual Linux Foundation, and then what's the name of it? This open source car company. We're basically almost down to setting a date for when they're going to come on, and then Local Motors is the name of the car company, and what is it here? Hold on. The Open Prosthetics Project, Jonathan somebody, I can't pronounce his last name, he was wounded in Iraq, and he's going to be doing a Kickstarter to kick off a round of funding, and I told him, when you're ready to kick off that Kickstarter, I would love to have you come on our podcast. And then somebody from the Ohio Linux Fest wants to be on. And
we've done that one before, haven't we?
No, we've never had some. We've plugged it for Jonathan, but Beth she's like the director of it. So
okay.
I told her I would get back to her after today. I just wanted to run it by with y'all. And then the Free Software Foundation, I went over and talked to their booth, and of course, they had volunteers there, and they said, I will give this to Richard Stallman's secretary.
Nice.
Could you imagine? I just I hope he doesn't go listen to any of our shows.
Particularly the one where I went on a rant about Stallman should shut up and go away.
Yes.
I did say at the end of that it was just an exercise in thought, but still.
Right. But and I was like, he might be a little out of our league. And
he will never come on the show. You know why he'll never come on the show? He requires that you refer to Linux as GNU/Linux while he's on the show, and I won't do that. So those two things will collide, and he will never be on the show.
Yep.
Well, it would just be weird if he even responds to the email. That would just be. We would definitely read that on the air if he.
Yeah, he did a Linux Action Show podcast, and Brian Lunduke, who's ordinarily very fiery, dialed it down a lot and still got in a fight with him. But dialed it down a lot, and every time Chris Fisher said Linux, Stallman stopped him and said, "What is that? What are you talking about?" Oh, excuse me, GNU Linux. Oh, yes. And it wasn't just that he made him do it. He was so neckbeard about it. It's like I don't know what you're talking. I don't understand that word. That's not a word. Linux isn't a thing. And so anyway, I just decided that he will never come on the show because I won't bow to those terms.
Well, I just
And
I
it's not like it's going to be a big loss to him.
Right.
Yeah.
That would put us on the map. Oh my gosh. But anyway, so those are some people that might have on the show.
It's cool.
In the future. I mean, we could conceivably have the rest of the year planned out just right here.
Yeah.
Just a matter of date scheduling. So
yeah, I mean, because we do a listener feedback every month, we do a couple of news things, and then an interview every month, and yeah, we are through December at that point.
Yeah,
pretty quickly.
So anyway, those are some of the. So hopefully those will pan out in the in the months coming up, and it'll be. I wouldn't have spent $1,500 just for 2 episodes of a podcast.
You spent it for the experience, Seth. The experience.
What?
It was for the experience.
That's right.
Yeah, it was totally for the experience.
So we'll ask this once we start recording.
Okay, are we ready to record?
I'm recording.
I've lost the hangout. There we go.
And I'm recording.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyday Linux, episode 157, the LinuxCon Report. Part 1, recorded August 27th, 2014, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Linux show that's not about Linux, but about life in the context of Linux. And this week we have a little more Linux and a little more life all thrown into one place as Seth tells us about his experience in the holy land of the neckbeards at LinuxCon. And of course, to do that, we have to have Seth here, and that Seth is the great GUI kid, Seth Anderson. Hey, Seth.
Hello, Mark, and welcome to the awesome family that is Everyday Linux.
And with Seth, as always, is the command line godfather, Mr. Chris Neves. Hey, Chris.
Hello, everyone, and I hope everyone is having a great and happy week, because mine's been wet and dreary for the last 3 days.
Are you sure you're not in Atlanta? Where it is the land. I'm calling it Wetlanta from now on. It's not Hotlanta anymore. It's Wetlanta.
Your seasons changed then.
No, that's just always. Being from what people call the armpit of hell in Central Texas, Atlanta has never impressed me with its heat. But man, does it rain a lot here. By the way, my name is Mark, sometimes referred to as the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. We're glad you're with us. And Seth is going to begin the show by complaining about Google Docs.
Dude, I mean, I went to Access. I wasn't around all week to work on the actual show. I was too busy treading to stay above water in the LinuxCon. And so when I fired up Google Docs today, all of a sudden, I mean, it's just like, why can't I find a document? Gone are the days when you can list by default, and now it sucks. It is awful. I hate it, but I'll hate it until they make some other change, and I'll long for the simplicity that it has now.
I guess I don't have the new update because my Google Docs looks exactly the same.
Oh, mine does not. It's changed tremendously now. There might be some secret, make this layout make sense option. I don't know how to drill down into Google-ness to find out, but now everything is like date related, and if you sort by like folders you have organized and you select some document, you may or may not get a document that was even in the folder you click select on. It's just, I mean,
it sounds very googly.
It does. It sounds very googly.
So what happens when engineers start doing UI?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Chris, have you got the new layout? I don't.
I'm not sure because my layout has changed dramatically, but I'm still able to move around and list by date and time and last modified and everything else. Unless you're in what they call the grid view, then it looks all sorts of wonky and weird, like thumbnails of everything.
Part of that might be my limited bandwidth. When I click apply to change, it doesn't ever change. So.
Could be, but yeah, I don't know if I have the same layout mistake as you do, but
that's the thing about Google is they're so big, they roll things out in stages, and not everybody gets it. I mean,
Right
my
away.
wife got the new Gmail when they changed massively and put the heads next to names like almost a week before I did, and I couldn't help her because I hadn't seen it. She was like, "What? How do I?" Because she usually goes to me to help her with these things, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. I've never seen this before. Sorry, you're gonna have to slog through this and let me know when my time comes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder how they pick how they roll out, because like I know when they did the first rollout for Priority Inbox, I got that right away. I mean, like the day after I heard it, it was I had it. I mean, it was like bing instantly. But the last couple of updates I've chugged a little behind, and I'm just curious I always would like to know what's their methodology for pushing out updates.
My guess it's whichever home server is considered yours. Everything roams, right? But there's a server on which your account was created, and when that one goes up, you're up. That's my guess.
Yeah. Or like I was checking in from Chicago all week, checking emails and stuff, and so it probably, this guy's in Chicago, we'll screw with him. And
he's already away
could
from
be.
home. Did you get any warnings about the fact that you were logging in from a different place?
Nope, not really.
When I was traveling a lot a couple years ago, I got that a couple of times. Just yesterday, you were in Texas. Today, you're in Wisconsin. What's going on here? Which
Yeah,
I
I've
think
seen
that's
that.
great. I like that. It was just a little box that said, you're logging in from an unusual location. We're going to make you enter your password a second time. And I'm fine with that, frankly.
No,
Yeah.
they're like, we're screwing with this guy. I don't care if it's him or not. And
You know what I'm not fine with? I'm not fine with the Ice Bucket Challenge anymore. I'm done with it. Anybody? Am I the only one? Maybe it's just in my Facebook feed that it's insane, but my feed now is almost entirely Ice Bucket Challenge. And don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. It's drawing awareness to a thing. The ALS Association says that they're getting, exponential increases in donations, and if challenged, I will participate because it's cool. Literally, it's cold. But it's one of those things. I'm afraid that there's going to be a backlash of it, and I think that in the end, the internet trolls are going to ruin this thing.
I'm afraid of that too. I know a lot of people that have been getting nominated here locally. For me, it took a long time for someone to get here, but now that it's here, it's all over the place, and it's just like, okay, guys, this is a bad thing. I know it. Everyone knows it. Why do we have to keep seeing it?
My kids just got challenged today by some other kids at our church, and if they want to do it, I'll let them do it. And if I'm nominated, I'll do it because, the original thing was you either donate $100 or you dump a bucket of ice on your head. Then it got turned to you donate $10 and get a bucket of ice dumped on your head. Now it's sort of you dump a bucket of ice on your head and you get $10. And a whole lot of the ones I've seen, there hadn't been much ice in that water. And so it's getting watered down. And frankly, I like it better now than the original. The original one was like trick or treat, right? Give me candy or I'll break windows. That's what trick or treating really. That's what that phrase means.
Sure.
Give me a treat or I will trick you. And so the Ice Bucket Challenge is that, donate money or suffer anguish. And I kind of like the way it's morphed into I'm manning up, you should too. And so I like that better. But still, it's one of those things that has gone so viral so quickly, it can only end up being a bad thing in the end.
Yeah, eventually it's going to fall on its head.
Well, I wonder, and it's probably just the cynic in me, how many people are doing just the ice bucket and not giving? Is it just another case of, some people call it slacktivism, other people call it hacktivism, where, look at how special I am. I'm making a huge difference. I'm not really doing anything, but I'm making a difference not doing anything. And that's my fear of this whole ice bucket thing. And I got quasi-challenged from somebody who just said, I want to see
same one
you
I
do
got
it,
too. Yeah.
but I'm not going to do it. And I don't know what I would do if I got challenged by somebody who actually did it.
Yeah.
Because at this point, if you don't do it, you basically,
You're shunned.
you know, you hate children.
Yeah, you're shamed.
And you're out to kill the
Well,
world.
and that was exactly the response. This person is a mutual friend of Seth's and mine, and basically this person challenged everybody without doing it. And my response was, no video, no challenge. I reject your reality and substitute my own.
There you
And
go.
the reply to that was, oh, well, you must want children to die. You know, that's, of course, a paraphrase of it, but that's what it ended up. If you care more about the rules than about people suffering, then, you know, you must be a terrible person, and that I'm okay with that. But, Seth, to answer your initial thing, according to the ALS Association, their own website, alsa.org, $62.5 million have come in as a result, direct result of the Ice Bucket Challenge. So while there may be a lot of slacktivism going on, it's also working.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
good.
awesome.
That's cool, Ben.
I wish it'd be more than just the Ice Bucket Challenge, forcing people to donate to good causes.
Yeah, and of course now the right wingers are saying, well, ALSA does one thing I don't like, so you shouldn't give your money there. Okay, fine. If you want to give your money to the Pope John Paul II Foundation, which also does ALS research, fine. But you don't have to go responding to every Ice Bucket Challenge you see, telling them how horrible the LSA does. They do stem cell research, and they don't rule out embryonic stem cells. And since you don't rule out embryonic stem cells, you murder babies. So that's why nobody should give to the LSA, because they murder babies.
Yeah, I prefer to just give and not really tell a lot of people that I did give. That's just me. But then again, I'm the one step away from get off my lawn guy.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have decided that if I'm challenged, and now as a result of the show, I can pretty much guarantee I will be in the next week. Because I have 4 women in my life that I love, my wife and my 3 daughters, I will have 4 buckets of ice dropped on me, and I will make 4 donations in each of their names. Because I don't do
Very
anything
nice.
halfway, baby.
It's all or nothing.
I saw one today. It was great. This guy filled a a cement truck with 4,000 gallons of water, sat behind it in a lawn chair, and said, all right, go. And all 4,000 gallons of water poured out of that cement truck onto him.
Wow.
And his response was, your turn, bitches. And I just loved that.
That's
awesome. That's awesome.
Brings it up to another level.
Yeah. I didn't see any ice, just to be pedantic. I don't think there was any ice in that water, so technically it didn't count.
Wow.
Because that's what people will say.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Chris, you're going to be doing some traveling soon to my neck of the woods.
Yes, I will
my
be.
My old neck of the woods.
Yeah, my current employer says that I need to go meet the rest of my team, and so they're sending me to Fort Worth for about a week, and about a little over 1 day more than a work week, so 6 days I'll be in Fort Worth. So
don't call it Dallas while
Worth.
you're there. They hate that.
Don't call it Dallas.
Yeah, even though they are separated by about 6 inches of road these days, they have pretty much become one city. If you call Fort Worth Dallas, you will be lynched.
That's what I've heard, and I'm not going to because it's Fort Worth.
If you call Dallas Fort Worth, they go, whatever.
Right, but the other way it doesn't work, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, you can call it North Texas, or you can call it the Metroplex. Both are acceptable terms.
And even DFW is acceptable in Dallas, not in Fort Worth.
Right.
And don't even get me started on the useless people. The useless people. They don't want to be known as Fort Worth or Dallas, even though they're right in the middle of them. But anyway.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, let me know. We'll have to hook up. I'll drive from Dallas to the foreign country that is Fort Worth one day, and we'll do dinner or something.
There was once a major news story where a guy running for mayor of Dallas had a television ad, and one of the stock photos that the firm in Puyallup, Wisconsin, whatever, used in his ad was of a Fort Worth mounted police officer in front of the Fort Worth City Hall.
Yeah.
And it was only on the screen for like 5 seconds, literally. Less than 10 seconds. And this made front page news in both the Dallas and the Fort Worth newspapers, and was the subject of late night news, local news, and everything, because somebody made that mistake, and the mayoral candidate doesn't know the difference between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Hmm.
Now, come on, people, just be less stupid.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and the mayoral candidate was like, I don't know, we hired somebody to do that. They just went through some stock footage. It was a good-looking guy. Get over it. But
Anyway, but yeah, it should be a fun trip. The nice thing, I was told that the hotel they're putting me up in is within walking distance of all the offices that I will be going to. So it's kind of nice. I don't technically even have to drive.
Yeah, but see, nobody in Texas walks. If you walk, you will be the one.
I will be.
Yeah. You'll have the sidewalks all to yourself.
Yeah.
Sweet.
People drive next door in Texas. The car is such a part of that culture. I'm not kidding. I have seen people walk out to their yard, drive 30 feet away, and pull into the driveway next door. I've seen it happen.
Wow.
Yep.
I'll be a fish out of water then, or a Canadian out of whatever.
Canadian out of Montana. I like it.
There you go.
That's good. So, Seth, did you have any interesting travel experiences along your way?
Well, okay. I flew, Buddy Fair by Southwest. And I just have to say, Southwest is awesome. I've in the past year and a half, I've flown, not a lot, but over a dozen times, and the Southwest flights were the nicest ones I've been on. I was gonna take names of everybody who did a great job, but I would just be reading the name of every Southwest person I met because they were all nice and helpful. But the TSA, man, I hate the fact that I'm automatically a terrorist before I even make it into the airport.
Yeah.
Because I was worried about being bumped for my flight. I didn't check my luggage. I carried my suitcase with me, and I forgot, oh, dear Lord, I'm going to destroy the world with a full-size tube of toothpaste.
Yeah, 3 ounces or less, my friend.
Well, no, the thing is, the TSA person in Dallas said, just next time don't do this. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. But in Chicago, coming back, you have to throw that away. I'm like, okay, whatever.
But I'm on my way home anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, it's just like, what did the person in Dallas do? I was like, they let me through and told me not to do it again. And so I had to throw away toothpaste because, I guess you could. It's just stupid.
Yeah.
The TSA, anyway, I just hate the fact that it's automatically assumed you're a terrorist because you want to get on the plane. I hate the dehumanization process you have to endure to fly. I found out I don't mind flying. It's not bad, but I hate the fact that you're not allowed to be a human as you make your way through the airport. That there's something wrong with our system. It's very broke.
But the TSA hand job I got in Wisconsin was really very gentle and quite thorough. So there's pluses to it as well.
See, and I was gonna say I have a TSA horror story too, but I thought I just chalked it up to me being me, a Montanan with a beard, and obviously that makes me a bad guy.
That's right, you're Ted Kaczynski.
That's right. Anyway, but we were coming back from San Diego, me, my 2 kids, and my wife, and so my wife and 2 kids just got let through the line. No, didn't have to. Well, they took off their shoes, but they just got to walk through the little metal detector. I walk up, and it was immediately, can you go to the backscatter X-ray, please, sir? And I'm like, no, I refuse. You'll have to get somebody over here, and they will have to pat me down because I will not go through that. And so instantly, it was a big old thing, and then for 15 minutes, I stood under guarded watch for someone to come and watch to do the hand job.
Yeah.
And it was just like, really? This is ridiculous. My wife and 2 kids got through without a problem.
Yeah.
Why would I be any worse?
Well, that's the perfect cover, because terrorists are known to travel with American women and American children. That's a known ploy for Middle Eastern terrorists to dress up like Montanans and travel with their children. It's been done thousands of times, and you should know this by now.
Oh, evidently, I just love the security theater because that's what it is.
When I was flying a lot there for a while, they do the random check for gunpowder residue as you're getting onto the plane. So you've already gone through security. This is when you're boarding the plane. They will put you under a black light, spray a chemical on you. I was randomly chosen every flight I got on. Randomly
Nice.
chosen every time.
You know what the sad thing is? If they did that to me, I would fail probably every time. Because every time my friends get back from target practice, they come over and hand me the gun and go, "Look at that! It's so hot! It's awesome!" And just go off a deep end on it. It's
Yeah,
like,
well.
okay, I'm now covered in residue.
That
Nice.
washes off, right? So, but the
Yeah.
thing is, I'd already gone through security. So, my guess is I was carrying a large backpack, and they assumed that I had slipped a large backpack through with materials for making bombs and had constructed a bomb while waiting for the plane.
Every time.
Yes.
Every time you did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Enough about how much the TS, because the idea was, right, let's take these people and make them government employees, and that'll make everything better. That worked. That was awesome.
No.
All right, listener feedback. We only have a couple of them, one suggestion and one corny joke, and then we'll move on to some of Seth's experiences at LinuxCon. Dennis has a book recommendation. It says, "Hey guys, y'all were talking about books on a recent podcast." If you start your sentence with y'all, I have to read it like that. Y'all were talking about books on a recent podcast, and I was wondering if y'all read Damon by Daniel Suarez. There's also a sequel called Freedom. I love Dan Brown's Digital Fortress and Deception Point. Keep up the great work. Love the show. I'm also a Patreon supporter. So, Dennis, thanks awesome for being a Patreon supporter and for giving me the opportunity to talk about our Audible.com referral program. So if you go to elementop.com and click on elementop.com/audible, actually I don't have a link there, just type it in, elementop.com/audible, you can get a free trial for 1 month. And now it is one of those things where if you don't cancel, they renew your subscription at the $14.95, I believe it is, rate of one book a month. But you can cancel the very second you sign up, and you still get the first book for free. It's yours. They won't take it away from you. And they can do that because their stuff is freaking awesome. And I say that because, no, I haven't read Demon, but it is in my Audible queue. And in fact, I have become, I just noticed there was no fanfare. I was just looking at my account recently and noticed that I've been an Audible listener for just at a year. In August, like the middle of August was a year. And I have become such an addict that I've actually just doubled my subscription. I'm not doing the 1 book a month anymore. I'm now doing the 2 book. And just this weekend, I bought 3 extra credits because I'm going on vacation and I don't want to run out of books to quote unquote read, to listen to. I've become if you're a podcast guy, you're gonna be an Audible guy.
Yep.
So I'm 1 book away from finishing the first Lost Fleet series, Jack Campbell. I will finish that up probably this week, and then I'm going to move on to the Honor Harrington series because Seth has talked about them so much.
Awesome. Both series are super awesome.
And then when I get through the 33 books of the Honor Harrington series, I'll go back and read the second Beyond the Frontier Jack Campbell series. And they're all it's great stuff. Audible has a no questions asked return policy. You buy a book, you don't like it, they'll give you your credit or your money back, and you go get another book. It's just no questions asked. There have been a couple of them that I read the description, thought it was interesting, or somebody recommended it to me, and then I realized I have wildly different tastes than the person recommended it to me, and I didn't enjoy the book. I think I've done it 4 times in a year. I've returned books, and just mainly because of just preference, taste thing. I thought I was going to like it, and I didn't. But again, out of over a dozen books, and of course they have a daily deal too. They'll send you an email every day and say, here's this book today, it's ordinarily $23, today it's $2, and they sucker me in on those more often than they don't. So I'm pretty much just started signing my checks over to Audible. Yeah, that's what I should do in an ad. Tell people it's going to cost them thousands of dollars. But it's totally worth it, and I look forward to when I run out of Audible books. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I mean, I'm going to have to listen to podcasts on the way home, and I love podcasts. I listen to them all day, but I have this cycle thing. When I'm at my desk, I listen to podcasts, and when I'm driving, I listen to audiobooks. And when that method breaks down, the pattern sensors in my brain go, whoop, something's wrong here. Something's wrong. We don't have a book to listen to. What's the problem? So that's why I just had to buy some more credits, because I knew that I had about 6 hours of travel each way, plus some. I intend to spend some time on the beach with earphones in, listening to a book, and I didn't want that to cause me to run out, so I bought extra. Audible.com, elementop.com/audible. Do me a favor, go sign up, check it out, cancel 30 seconds after you sign up. That's fine. I still get paid. Cool.
See, one of the things I'll bring up is about the Audible guys is that they've actually also tied their books to it. So if you have the book as a Kindle book and you tie it to your Audible subscription, you can pick up in the book wherever you leave off reading or listening to.
Whisper
It'll go both ways.
It's awesome.
Yep.
Now, not all books are able to do that, but a large portion of them are. And so you can
growing.
Yeah. So Amazon bought Audible a while back, and when they released I think it was before they even made the Kindle, maybe shortly after. So they started syncing those libraries up a while back, and yeah, I discovered that accidentally. I bought the Ender's Game book, one of the first books I bought, and when this new book popped up in my Kindle, oh, well, that's cool. I got both of them. So something to check out, audible.com or elementop.com/audible for our 15-day trial. Or you can go to audibletrial.com/elementop. That's a lot longer. Just go to elementop.com/audible. So no, Dennis, I haven't read Demon, but it's on my list. And
it's in my queue as well for my reading queue, because I podcast every time I drive somewhere, but I'm reading when I'm at home. So, and I can't do books and do work at the same time. My brain just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's the way I am with podcasts. And some podcasts I can't listen to while I work. Some of them are so dense I have to pay attention, and I can't. I have a colleague who listens to books while she works, and I think I don't know how she can do that and absorb the book, because a book to me is not just about story. It's about the language and the way things are put together and the interplays of the subtleties of it, and I need to pay attention to that. I need to hear that this guy used this word instead of that word, because that, for me, is an important part of the book. Not everybody is. Some people just want plot point A, plot point B, resolution, and we're good. But for me, language is an important part of it, and I will chuck a good story if it's written in, for example, Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift. The language was so arcane and so 16th century British, I just couldn't handle it. Well, I guess it would have been 19th century British. And that was one of the books I returned. Not because the story wasn't good. It's a great story. The narration was outstanding. It's not narration. I shouldn't use that word. The performance was outstanding, but the words, the language was, I just couldn't get through it. For me, that's an important thing, and so I have to be doing very little else. And in traffic, particularly in Atlanta traffic, you are literally doing nothing else. It's not that you're distracted while you're driving; you're distracted while you're sitting.
See, that's why, and that's one of the reasons why I can't listen to a book and drive, because even though my drive is about an hour to get there to work every day, in Montana you have to watch out for the random deer, cow, or other furry critter that might cross the road. So unless you don't like your car, you need to pay attention to the road, especially when the fog is so thick that you can't even see the road diamonds as you drive by them.
All right. At that point, I think I would be driving slower.
I drove slower, but I still couldn't see them. It was a little spooky going to work that day.
There was a couple of days when my usual 20-minute drive took 50 to 75 minutes because of fog, and I'm like, I'm not going to go any faster than my headlights can travel.
Yeah,
right.
I ended up finding a nice, super brightly lit semi-truck who looked like a Christmas tree, and I just followed the Christmas tree.
Yeah. If he mows over a cow, he's going to clear the way for you.
Or if he goes off the road, I'll know not to follow him. So yeah, it was a long. Actually, there's been 2 days like that now. So I'm really kind of worried about what the winter's going to be like this year.
All right, and the next bit of listener feedback: Rick wonders if the Pope is a Linux user. A quote from the Pope talking about some nerve problems he has. The Pope said, "Must treat them well, these nerves. Give them mate, an Argentinian stimulant, every day." He says, wonder if cinnamon would help. So that's it. That's the listener feedback. Sorry, that's the best we got. Should have probably done that first and then done the book thing. but that was just too good not to do. The Pope
Yeah.
uses Linux.
Yeah,
Well,
that
I
sets
guess-
the bar low for me too. So
That's
I
right.
was gonna say I thought the maybe the Pope doesn't do it, but I think isn't the I can't remember
Vatican?
what they call it. Yeah, the Vatican's record system is all Linux, though, if I remember correctly.
Sure, why not? I'll let that propaganda go.
That's what I've heard it and I've seen it written once, but I can't remember where I can't recall where I saw it.
well, Chris, that's 2 sources more than you need to make proclamations on the internet. So we'll go with it.
Sure.
All right, Seth, tell us about a stranger in a strange land, i.e., Seth at LinuxCon.
Oh man, it was really really cool. Just to kind of reiterate the story on how I got to LinuxCon, I was sitting at home one day going, I wonder, and for whatever reason, I clicked on LinuxCon from the Linux Foundation, and I saw that they had press passes, and so I fired off an email to them and said, hey, what are the qualifications to get a press pass? I mentioned I have a podcast. We have a few thousand weekly listeners. Just curious. And then I get back an email. I've registered you for here's your registration confirmation for LinuxCon. And I was like, oh, crap. I have to go now.
Now suddenly you have to do something.
Yeah. So, and not only did he register me for LinuxCon, he also registered me for like the security kernel update, which, oh my gosh, I was so. They were talking, and I think the words were English, but I had no clue what they were saying, and it was just I was just looking at these people, and I was like, oh my God, I don't even now. I know how my friends think when I talk because I have no clue what these people are talking about. But on the other hand, it was really cool because you had people from like Google and Red Hat and the NSA and Department of Defense, as well as Linux Foundation people, IBM, all of Oracle, all of these people were in this room talking back and forth to each other, and there wasn't like, my company's trying to kill your company, blah, blah, blah. It was just like all of these people talking about the security issues involved in the Linux kernel, and that was really, really neat to see. The Google guy wasn't saying, why everybody should be using Google's latest OS because blah, blah, blah. They were talking about the Linux kernel, and they weren't talking about how awesome their company was, and they would give presentations, and of course some of the presentations involved what their companies were doing. It was all about the kernel, and so that was really neat to see, because sometimes you might think that, oh, nobody works on the Linux kernel because the foundation only hires, doesn't employ many people, but you have all of these major companies, multi-billion-dollar companies working and contributing code, and that's people's job at that company is you work on the Linux kernel. So that, even though I couldn't tell you what they were talking about other than Linux kernel security stuff, that aspect was really, really cool to see. So I thought that was pretty neat, and it kind of, I felt all warm and fuzzy for at least the near future of the Linux kernel with that. But that was Tuesday, because Monday I spent traveling and I didn't make any of the Monday sessions for that. But that's for Tuesday. And again, I was just like, I don't know what they talked about. I don't even know why I went there. I don't know why I'm in Chicago. But then
wait, before you go on, did your special super secret all access press pass get you any privileges?
Or any swag?
No.
Was there an executive washroom you got to use? Anything?
Basically, I wasn't barred from any place. I mean, it was just like some people just said all access attendee, and mine said media. I could go anywhere they could go. I could talk to the people. I could get swag. That kind of stuff. But so no, it wasn't there. They were so secret you couldn't even find them, I guess. I didn't know they were there. I walked around overwhelmed most of the time, so maybe there was this special secret handshake, but I don't know. But so I was able to go everywhere, and I mean, at a few points I was standing like, not 5 feet away from Linus and a couple of people he was talking with. But of course, there was never a time he wasn't talking with a group of people, and I didn't want to, if he would have been alone, I was ready. I had my microphone ready and my thing, but I wasn't going to interrupt.
Mr. Torvalds, Seth Anderson, Everyday Linux Podcast. I have a few questions for you.
Yeah. If I would have found him alone, I would have at least said, hey, could I ask you a few questions? But, I didn't want to be a jerk and interrupt people. But so I was able, I could have touched him if I wanted to, but I didn't. So he wasn't as tall as I thought. I'm taller than him. So
you're taller than a lot of people, Seth.
Yeah. But this other guy, he's like head and shoulders taller than me. So, and he's like one of the head honchos. So I'm not taller than him. But I know they're all smarter than me. So, but yeah. So that was, or go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay. So the actual LinuxCon started Wednesday, and today I thought we would just talk about some of the keynotes, and then I talked to a few different people and got some short little interviews, and we'll play them here. So the keynotes for the first day were just kind of basic things. One, the executive director of the Linux Foundation, he just kind of gave the state of Linux, and he basically said, we dominate everything but the desktop, which everybody knew. So Linux is going great. The adoption rate is way out there. And then the next thing was like the Linux kernel panel, and it had Linus and a bunch of other super high-up people that I'd never heard of because I'm not an uber geek. But they just talked about, kind of just general stuff, and it was kind of neat. And somebody asked Linus, with the success of Linux, what's the one thing you wish for? And he's like, I really want the desktop because that's basically the only where that, the only place that Linux doesn't really dominate because, the Android runs on the Linux kernel. Supercomputers, that list is basically a Linux list. In the server room, large portions of the internet run on Linux. So it's everywhere. Embedded systems, automobiles, all that kind of stuff. The only place the Linux desktop doesn't dominate, or at least as a very major player, is the actual desktop. And so he wants that. And he was like saying, and we're to the point where the kernel isn't the problem. It's more of an infrastructure type problem. And so I could kind of agree with that.
I read a couple articles about that quote, actually. That was a quote that a lot of people latched onto. And some of them are saying, do we need a desktop anymore? We're in the post-PC world, yada, yada. I still don't buy that. Desktops are still going to be around for a while. And obviously, Linus knows that, too. Did you see any hero worship while you were there? Just other geeks slavering all over him?
No, but like I say, I never saw him without people around him talking to him. The other people who were like high up, that level in the Linux Foundation, I saw all of them at one point with nobody around them. So I know there wasn't like a lot of worship, but he attracted at least a small crowd everywhere he went.
All right.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, but he seemed down to earth, and granted, I don't know who all he was talking to, but he had a smile on his face, looked pleasant. I didn't see any birds fly. I didn't hear any rants, so it seemed like a down-to-earth kind of guy. But yeah, so I thought we would play the first one. This is an interview with Darren Davis. Darren works at SUSE, and I just basically we were looking at this board where they had people who had tweeted with the LinuxCon hashtag, and so he was looking at that, and we talked for a second. I said, "Hey, I do this podcast. Would you mind answering a few questions?" And he said, "Sure." And so we did a short interview. Can you cue that up, Mark? All right, this is Seth. I'm back here after the closing keynote for the first day of LinuxCon, and I'm with Darren Davis, who is with SUSE, and I will just let him talk for a few minutes. Darren, thank you for taking a few minutes to be on the Everyday Linux podcast.
Well, thank you very much. So, what kind of things are you looking to know? My impression of the show? Yeah. So I think the keynotes this afternoon are really good. We've had a lot of traffic, a lot of people come by and looking to see, what's, for us specifically, what SUSE is doing. And of course, we're one of the leading providers of enterprise Linux, SUSE Linux Enterprise. But not only that, we're really getting heavily into the cloud. So SUSE is now available in public cloud. Clouds like Amazon Web Services, Google Compute Engine, and SUSE itself. We provide OpenStack-based cloud offerings for people who want to build their own public cloud.
All right, I'll kind of put you on the spot here a little bit. How could an everyday user, not necessarily a developer or anything, but an everyday user who wanted to get involved with Linux, how could they interact with your company to do that?
Yeah, a great question. And for us, it's always back to the community. And for SUSE, our community is the OpenSUSE community. And OpenSUSE is one of the free Linux distributions out there. We have a very vibrant community. And so for people who want to get directly involved, go to OpenSUSE.org, get OpenSUSE Linux, and start there. And for our company, a lot of future employees and things like that, they started in the OpenSUSE community. They get recognized, and they can come and end up at SUSE or go on to other open source companies.
All right. Would you say that? I mean, of course, every community is out there, and of course, there's some people in the communities who just say RTFM to everything, and then you have the people that are really helpful. Do you have like good documentation and kind of good training that, say, somebody was thinking about they wanted to get into Linux as a career, could they just start out with OpenSUSE and then go on, the community pull them along and get into where maybe working, not necessarily kernel developer, but like community maintainer or something like that?
Well, most definitely. So for the OpenSUSE community, again, it starts at the website. There are great resources with forums. So for people who want to get started, there's all the way from beginning forums. I've never ever installed SUSE Linux or OpenSUSE ever in my life. You can go ahead and download it, install it, go to the forums, and start communicating with people. We also have Internet Relay Chat, IRC, where you can actually talk to people live online and ask questions about anything. And people get this impression, it's like, well, I got to be this uber computer geek to go start. No, we need people to do documentation. We have a wiki page there, and everything that we document on the wiki. So people can participate by organizing events. They can help work on the documentation. Being a new user, they can point out holes in the documentation and say, hey, this doesn't make any sense to me, and they can either go do it themselves or work with the community and get it improved.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I'll just ask you any closing thoughts that you would like to leave to Everyday Linux Podcast with?
Yeah, the best thing is decide, basically get involved. It's an open community, and regardless of what Linux you choose, or just Linux in general, basically get started. It's really easy. The barrier's really low to get started. There are many Linux distributions out there to go start. Grab one, start playing now. Each step you go along, you learn more and more, and it just broadens your exposure, and you can get into the community, through just starting to play with it.
Cool. Thanks, Darren. I'll let you go, and thank you for being a part of our podcast. And stop.
All right. So, but when you started talking to people, did you preface it with, I'm from this show, this is what our show's about, or did you just go?
No, I kind of told them I'm with the Everyday Linux Podcast. We're aimed at the everyday user to show them you don't have to be an uber geek to use Linux. I'd give them basically some variation of that spiel.
Good.
And the people I ask, pretty much most all of the presenter type people that I ask agreed. A lot of the people who were just attendees, they didn't want to. And actually, most of the people I asked from the Linux Foundation, like who were there, like kind of organizing the event, most of them were like microphone shy.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Geeks aren't known for social skills.
Right.
And so I understand
Very
that.
True.
What I wanted to comment on what he said before we move on, that the idea that the way that our audience, the casual user, can best benefit any distro is letting them know when you have problems. And I think that's what everyday users are most scared to do, because when they run into a problem, they think, I'm too dumb to understand this. But basically what he said is, if you're having a problem, it's because we haven't made it easy enough for you.
Right.
And that's typical for OpenSUSE. That's their mantra. When I was dealing with them before, way back when, even back 10 years ago, that's the same thing that they keep pushing down, is that if you're having an issue, that means we didn't work hard enough. So it's good on them to after 10 years to be still pushing that thought process out.
Yeah, so I guess we'll move on, and I'll just kind of I put a link in the show notes, and we'll have that when we release the show. They are videos from the people from all the keynotes at LinuxCon up, and I would say I would just urge you, go ahead and watch these. There's a couple of them where you'll like, I don't really know what he's talking about, but the majority of them you will have no problem following along, and I thought they were really cool. So Wednesday evening, the guy from edX, which is the massive open online courses, they've partnered with the Linux Foundation to provide the Introduction to Linux course. He gave a talk talking about kind of the science of education and how there's all these great theories and research done on education, but yet colleges and schools look like they did 100 years ago. Maybe it's time for a change. And then this guy from Local Motors talked about basically open sourcing a car company from design to implementation, and it was a really, really neat talk. And I'm hoping to get somebody from there on the show. We're trying to work out a schedule thing, just a little teaser for what might be coming up. And then this other guy, or this lady, Eileen Evans, she's from HP, and she talked about the new open source professional, and she really talked about how careers are not linear anymore. You don't start as an intern with this company and then progress all the way through. She talked about how she started in math and then went to law and then ended up in an actual business position, and that's kind of the open source tinkerer / hobbyist person. Like Mark's example, he was in education, then he went to medical. I mean, I've done everything from customer service to desktop support. I've been in education. I'm in the legal industry now, but all mine are kind of revolving around tech. But you don't have to do that anymore. You're just like, well, I don't have a degree in college, but how can I get involved in computing? Well, you can contribute. You can get involved with one of these Linux communities. Just pick one of your choice and get involved in it. And most of those companies hire from within their communities. If you've developed relationships with people from that company as a community member, then they'll advocate for you, and they get you past that first interview or that first computer sort of the resumes and get you into real people. And then the Thursday morning keynotes talked about this guy from Cisco basically talked about the Internet of Things and how it is exploding. And it was that now there's more than one device connected to the Internet. There's more devices on the Internet than there are people in the world, which is just kind of that's kind of a weird thought. And and that number would be 5 or 6 times, within the next 10 years. There could be, for every one person in the planet, there could be 5 or 6 or more things connected to the Internet. And then they had somebody from Intel talking about open source and how Linux, is in the new connected world. And it was just I just kind of my eyes kind of glazed over on his because he was more of a technical thing, and I didn't get a lot out of him. But I thought we would go to this next interview. Catherine Faint is she is somebody we went to a presentation together, and I just kind of struck up a conversation with her afterwards. And I was talking to her for coming. I said, "Hey, would you like to be on my podcast?" And she agreed. And anyway, I'll just we'll play the interview. Hey guys, this is Seth coming at you from the floor of a presentation I just finished, and I'm here with Catherine Fant from Collin College. She was sitting in it with me, and we started talking, so I asked her if she would be on our podcast, and she agreed. Hi, Catherine.
Good afternoon.
Cool. So what is it that you do?
I teach with the Collin Computer Networking Program. I'm actually in the Science and Technology, Engineering and Math division. And we also have a convergence technology area that includes studies of cloud services, and that would be why I'm coming to hear about the Cloud Open, the Linux part, the Linux 80% part of the cloud services.
So have you had any involvement with Linux before coming here, or is this kind of like a fact-finding expedition?
This is a fact-finding expedition. I did teach a Network Plus class at a high school last spring, and one of the fun things that we got to do was add a VirtualBox in Ubuntu and play with Linux a little bit and do some networking with Linux. And so then in exploring the whole aspect of the cloud directions that we were doing with our team at Collin College, when the Linux question came up, I was like, yes, I want to go. I want to go learn about the Linux part of cloud.
Well, let me ask you this. Did you find that you had to stop and teach how to use Linux, or do you think it's mature enough that especially students today go, oh, I know what I'm doing?
It is fabulous. The new GUI interfaces that make it so user-friendly. It's as easy to get used to as Windows is. You know, Windows changes their operating systems, and it's no different than changing from a different Windows operating system. So it's very, very user-friendly now.
Well, that is really cool. So I know we've only been through like one day of the conference so far. Have you learned anything yet? That's kind of a broad question.
I absolutely have. And I think I've got a lot. I've written as many questions down as I have notes of things I've learned, because I'm trying to connect all of the dots. Are you asking me what specifically I've learned?
If you want to give like maybe one thing, you can. But you know, I mean, we could talk all day. But just what's one thing you've picked up so far?
I guess probably the thing that's standing out the most in my mind right now is the new developments in networking through software as opposed to hardware. And that directly affects me, since I have taught the Cisco Networking Academy program for 10 years. So I'm very, very curious about how all of that works, and I'll be delving into that more.
Well, awesome. So let me, you're a teacher, so you have some background in this. Do you think that Linux is to the point where an everyday computer user could just pick it up and run with it just the same way they could pick up a new version of Windows and run with it?
I absolutely do. I do. I had students who loaded Ubuntu onto their VirtualBox on their desktop machines, and they ran with it. They found it took them no time to explore. Of course, these are young people, and they're used to exploring technology, but they had no problem. In fact, I would get occasionally I'd be going, I don't know how to find, and they would show me, because they were going all different directions exploring. So it is very user friendly and not something anyone should shy away from at this point. I would challenge anyone to load VirtualBox, which is free software, and then download Ubuntu and load it and just play with it. You can do it on any PC.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I don't want to keep you. Any final words for our listeners?
Linux is coming. You got to get with the program.
All right. Thank you, Catherine.
I just wanted to comment on the one thing she said there. You asked the question, can an everyday user pick up Linux and run with it? And I loved her answer in that, guess you can. If you don't know it, explore it, that kind of thing. But it made me think that the same is true of Windows and Mac. We complain that it's too hard to do certain configuration tasks in Linux, or it's too hard to set up devices, or it's too hard to find drivers. The average person, the everyday regular kid in middle school, doesn't know how to do that on Windows or Mac either. You know, they take their Mac to the Genius Bar, or they pay some guy to come to their house to clean viruses off their Windows machine. So I hadn't really thought of it until just this moment when she said that. But I think we Linux advocates are actually being unnecessarily biased against Linux when we complain about the things that are too hard to do.
Yeah, maybe. It's an interesting thought process. I liked how she brought up the idea that about the anybody can try it and anybody should.
Right.
Because I think that's a great thing that
No excuse not
everybody.
to try it.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. You can't hurt your machine with it if you're virtualizing it, so why not at least give it a shot?
Well, yeah, and she talked about virtualization, but we can just reiterate here. You can also do a live CD or USB key these days, and try it without doing. Of course, I guess you would have to have a CD or DVD player, and those are apparently almost extinct if you listen to mainstream media.
Or you pay Black Lab Linux $25 and they send you a bootable thing.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to really make any changes to your system. You don't even have to install a disk. You can just boot off of a different device, be it USB key or CD, and if you don't like it, you just take it out and throw it away and use some hand sanitizer, and you've lost nothing. Yeah. So, but go ahead.
It is still a bit of a geeky process to put a typical ISO on a USB stick.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, Black Lab Linux, they're the only people I know of that will just send you a USB stick. Ubuntu might. I don't know if the last time I checked, they were still doing DVDs.
Yeah.
But it is, that part is still a little too difficult. But it's not easy to install Windows 7 on a USB stick either.
Right.
So it's the same amount of difficulty no matter what the OS.
Yep.
Yeah, we've made the point here. It might not be easier or it might not be better, but parity is a good word.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say they were equal. I think each OS, even the fruity one, there are things they do better than the others, but there are also things they do worse than the others. And so, even Linux does some things worse than the others. So parity, they're all comparable.
Of course, that's just me loving Windows and hating Linux again.
There you go.
Right. Yes, because you are what's the antonym for moderation? I can't think of one.
Yeah.
It just went blank. I was gonna say you were the the fountain of unmoderated, but I couldn't think of a good word there. So, but yeah. Any other comments about Karen or?
We need
or
more
Catherine,
teachers. We need more teachers like her. Teachers who aren't scared.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, Chris, teachers are afraid to say, "I don't know."
Yep.
And what the greatest, the first teacher on record, Socrates, said the beginning of knowledge is admitting that you know nothing. And our classroom teachers today are scared to tell their students they don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was the first words out of my mouth. If I ever ran into a problem they would bring me an issue, I'd look at them straight in the face and go, I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to go look it up.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
All right, so I guess we'll jump to the Friday keynotes, and then we'll queue up the last interview. Friday, there was 3 keynotes. One was from the vice president at MakerBot 3D printing. I got to see a 3D printer actually in action. One of the days was Superhero Day, so you got to dress up like a superhero if you wanted to. And the guy who dressed up as Thor used the 3D printer to print a hammer because, he didn't have one. And so, and of course, it was a smaller one, and he didn't paint it or anything, but it was kind of cool. And you could just sit there and watch it make things. So that was cool. And then, like I say, MakerBot is one of the bigger companies in the 3D printer space. Next one was this guy, Jonathan. I'm not even going to try his last name. He's president of the Open Prosthetics Project. I found his presentation maybe one of the most interesting and informative there. If you watch, what's the Christian surfer girl movie who lost her arm?
Soul Surfer.
Soul Surfer, yeah. If you watch Soul Surfer, the prosthetic thing, and you always see these news stories about this awesome prosthetic hand that looks just like a real thing. But he was like, really, the state of prosthetics is this hook that was patented in 1912. He's like, the advances are, it's not wood and iron, now it's titanium. But he was lamenting the sorry state of prosthetics, and so he has formed the Open Prosthetics Project to kind of try to address that. And why is it that prosthetics basically suck. He was in Iraq, and he was wounded. Lost a lot of his arm, so he has a little past his elbow on one side. And he was talking about, he was just sharing some of his struggles and kind of how the press is selling us a bill of goods that the prosthetic problem is solved, and he's like, nothing could be further from the truth. We're sitting in 100 years, we've basically gone zero. In the field. And so
it's like Jonathan was talking about last week, that there's not enough financial incentive because the audience is so small.
Yeah, and that was one of the points he made. He was like, and I don't remember the number, I don't want to make it up, but it was a very small number of people who have this problem, and so there's nothing for that. And you might make good press by saying something, but there's not a lot of money behind it. And he was talking about, if Google will just turn over the resources of one of the 8 robotics companies they bought last year, maybe we could make some progress. But anyway, like I say, I thought his was just one of the most informative and insightful presentations. The local automotive guy was probably the funnest one, but his was probably the most informative and insightful one there. And if you're only going to watch one of these keynotes, listeners, I would find the one from the Open Prosthetics Project. It is from Friday, and just watch it. All of these keynotes are 20 to 30 minutes, so they're not super long. You can watch them over a lunch hour or like an after work one day. It take less time than watching one episode of The Big Bang Theory. I think it'd be well worth your while. And then the last one was a guy who was in the IBM systems.
Before we move on to the next topic, I had one thing I want to say about this. I saw this video on YouTube a while back of this guy who was working on prosthetics in a lab. May have been this guy, may not have been. And they were working on this prosthetic arm, and right now it's too big, doesn't have a power source, it's not portable, you got to plug it in. But as he was talking, he was an amputee as well. And as he was talking, he was tightening a nut on this thing that they had created. It was an actual machine. And he said, we keep trying to make machines like the human hand. If I'm going to have a fake one, I want it to be better. So he grabbed the nut with his bare hand and rotated his wrist 360 degrees a couple dozen times as he was talking and screwed the nut down. He said, do that. None of you can do that. If I'm going to build a machine, I'm going to build it better than the one that I have. I like that idea. Of course, like I said, right now it's not portable, it's not practical, but I like that idea. If you're going to lose an arm, by golly, let's give you a $6 million man bionic arm.
Yeah, or a Terminator arm.
All right, before we go on, I need to reset my mixer. Hold on a second.
All right.
All right, continue, please.
All right. The last keynote was from IBM Systems, and they were basically talking about their next $1 billion in Linux and where it's going. And this is not something the everyday user would be real concerned about, but for the type of person who goes to LinuxCon, it's really cool stuff. There's the x86 Intel architecture that basically runs the server room world, and you don't hear a lot about it, but the PowerPC is IBM's architecture, and you couldn't take a machine running on x86 and run it on PowerPC. You would have to recompile applications and do all this kind of stuff. And he's talking about how they, through the work with Linux, the actual OS, you can do just that now. If you need to, if your hardware fails and you have to move a VM, or you just, back up off of an x86, restore on the PowerPC, and it goes forward without any problem. And he was talking the vast majority of software will go without any changes at all, and there's only just a tiny sliver with any significant changes. The others are just minor configuration, and I thought that was really cool that they've addressed the issues, the incompatibility in the hardware between the Intel hardware and the IBM hardware. So again, that's not something that the everyday computer user would care much about, but the geek and the developer and the system admin, somebody who's purchasing hardware, that's something they might care a lot about. And I thought that one was pretty cool. And not related to that in any way, the last interview I wanted to play today is Dawn Foster. She actually gave one of the presentations I went to, and I caught her after she left and enjoyed her presentation, and I asked if she would do an interview, and she did. And I want to just say, obviously, you all know that I'm Seth, but I just kind of need a way to start the interview, and so that's why I say, hey, this is Seth. No big revelation there. But anyway, this is Dawn Foster, and if this interview sounds the best, this is actually the last one I had done. So those other two were the first two I had done, and so by this one, I wasn't so overwhelmed by LinuxCon. I was kind of used to myself there, and I knew how to ask some questions. So this is Dawn, and then we'll do that. Take it away, Mark. Hey everyone, this is Seth here, and I am talking with Dawn Foster from Puppet Labs, and she just did a presentation over communities and open source, and she agreed to be interviewed. So Dawn, thanks for taking a few minutes to be on our show.
Thank you.
Well, all right, so give us the 1 minute. Who is Dawn? What does she do? How did you get interested in computers and technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Dawn Foster. I first got interested in computers and technology back in the 80s. I had an Atari. Maybe it even started before that. My dad and my grandfather were amateur radio people, so they were really big into amateur radio, and so I got my amateur radio license when I was a teenager. I learned Morse code when I was, I think, in kindergarten the first time. And then, so this formed sort of an affinity for technology in general. And then when I got the Atari, honestly, all of our games were bootlegged. So, my dad was kind of a hacker. So he would give us tapes with computer games on them, which was pretty cool. But I also liked to write my own. So I would do my own programming on the Atari just to see what I could make it do, because I thought that was pretty interesting. And then, I ended up going and eventually getting a computer science degree, like a lot of people do. I was a system administrator for Unix back in the day, and I ended up doing the open source thing sort of by accident. I was at Intel, and they needed someone to focus on Linux and open source tools for new platforms, and they looked at me and they were like, well, you did Unix, that's kind of like Linux, and you used a lot of open source software when you were a sysadmin, so you know something about that, and so here you go. And so I got started with open source back in about 2000, 2001, and I really enjoy it. And so I've been doing kind of community-related stuff and open source stuff since that time.
Wow, you've been in it a long time. So how does this LinuxCon stack up with some of the ones you've been to in the past?
I think the LinuxCons keep getting better, actually. The early ones were very focused on the kernel, which is not my thing. I'm not a kernel developer, and that's a very low-level technology. And so I feel like the Linux Foundation has done a really great job of adding additional components onto LinuxCon, like Cloud Open, and they have, days devoted to specific things. And so I think they're getting a much wider variety of people, which I think really adds to the conference. So last year.
Awesome. One thing we talk about in our podcast is that you don't have to be a developer to help out the community or Linux in general. And your title is actually a community manager. Is it important for people who aren't just the developers and the super users to be a part of a community, and not just a part, but to be involved in a community?
Really, anybody can be involved in the community. People, I think a lot of times, especially those of us that have been in communities for a really long time, a lot of people focus too much on just the people who contribute code. But the reality is these projects they're almost like fully formed companies in and of themselves. They need all of the stuff that you would expect a company to have. They need people to write blog posts. They need people to do marketing. They need people to go out and evangelize about the product. So they actually, I think users are incredibly important when it comes to these technologies, because someone who uses the technology can go out and they can evangelize it to other users, and they can have, presentations, they can talk to other people, they can write about it, and really do a lot to promote the project and do good work for the project without actually contributing any code. They can lead user groups. There's lots of stuff you can do, even if you've never written a line of code in your life.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's, sometimes it's like I'm a geek, but I try to talk non-geeks to people, and sometimes they just think, oh, they're just saying that, but it's great to hear from other people that that's important. Switching gears a little bit, you said you read 73 books last year. What is like your top one or two current favorite sci-fi books?
Oh, so my current favorites. So one of them is The Martian by Andy Weir. So he's a brand new author. It's hard sci-fi. It's really story. I would encourage anyone to read it. Another new author that I really like is Hugh Howey, and he's written a series called Wool, WOOL, like sheep's wool, that is really good. And so I would encourage people to read some stuff by him. He's fairly new, but really incredible writer. And then there's all the classics, right? There's Asimov, who I'm a big fan of, and Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game is another good one.
Cool. So any parting words you would like to leave to the Everyday Linux podcast listeners?
I would just say, kind of keep going with it. I think that, we really do need people out there who are using Linux and talking about it, and basically just, keep participating in your communities and, talk about the stuff that you're doing to other users. I think it's important.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Any comments on that?
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, that surprised me. She, being that high level, she had her ham radio when she was a teenager. That's impressive, because that's, I don't know. She didn't say what level of ham she was, but that's an impressive thing to be able to say in general, and to program for the Atari. Awesome.
I programmed for the Atari. It was just basic back then.
I know, but still, how many kids do you know that would actually think, I want to program something for this. I want to do something on this. Most of them just want to play a game nowadays.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in my experience, I had wasn't an Atari. It was my brother had a VIC-20 Commodore, and I had a TRS-80 Tandy, same generation computers. And you could either buy cartridges at $60 a pop or write your own software. So in our case, coding wasn't an option. Now, it came with a book of code, right? And you just typed it in and saved it on a tape, an audio cassette tape.
Right.
Yep.
Or, once you do that, you start to understand that in-key $ means input keyboard of a string value, and you start playing with that, and you learn. So I suspect she probably learned the same way. Any good geek starting in that era would have done the same thing. Kids today, you give them an iPad or an Android tablet, they download an app, and they think that's programming it. That it's just the era she comes out of.
But it's still pretty cool. I mean, I was really impressed with a lot of the things she said she was doing. I'm surprised she referred to her dad as a hacker, though. I don't know too many people
hacker dads.
That would take that moniker. I know I wouldn't. If my kid says, look at my dad, he's a hacker, I'd be like, no.
I'm not a hacker, I'm a hack. That's the difference.
Ooh. Oh. Through the heart.
I will chime in on her sci-fi recommendation and say you definitely have to read The Martian. It is awesome.
It's in my Audible queue.
Do they have it out on Audible?
Yeah.
Okay. It's worth it.
That one will be great because it's written like a lot of it has like log entries. So that one is. I will actually take up the Audible free trial and I will do that one just because I want to hear that and maybe convert me to the audio non-reading book consumption method. Although I doubt it.
So I think you will be hamstrung by how slowly you have to listen to somebody else read. Because The Martian is like a 12-hour book, and you probably finished it in an hour and a half.
No, I read it over a few days. I probably put 6 or 7 hours in it.
All right, enough about that. Back to the interview. Any other comments?
No. What did y'all think?
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say you could definitely tell that you were on a roll for that one there, Seth, because that one was probably the best introed and questions asked out of the ones you've played so far.
Well, like I say, that's the last one I had done, and so I don't know how good it was, but I think it was. We would all agree it was less bad than the others, which were like the first ones I had done. So
I think she was a good example of the mature Linux user and advocate. The
Yeah.
gray beard, but I hope she didn't have a beard.
no,
But I'm guessing based on the timeline of her age, she's probably 50ish. I mean, of her
no,
story.
she's like our age.
Okay, so a little younger than a little younger than I expected. But so she got started even younger than I did. And she followed that track of playing with it, seeing what it can do, and we were lucky enough to be coming of age in this time when all you needed to know was something about computers to get a job in computers.
Right.
You didn't have to have a fancy education, and that's how we all three of us have our careers. Is that we were the guys who weren't afraid of it. And so I think that's great that she's there. I don't think and one of the things that bothers me about the Linux community at large is that it's those people in charge, and they're not. That is a singular generation. It has happened once. It will not happen again with microcomputers as we know them. And we're still writing for and organizing for and trying to satisfy those people. And I'm not saying that she's at fault, but I'm saying she's part of the establishment. And I think that unfortunately we're doing, and we're not going to get Linus's desktop like he wants unless we actually start trying to please the idiots, right? And the guys that the people in the forums get so frustrated with. Don't run them away, guys. That's your future. And there's a lot of guys who would say, well, I don't want that to be the future of Linux. Linux is better off without them. Linux is dead without them.
Yeah.
We need the idiot users, plain and simple.
Because, we were all the idiot user at one point.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter if you learned it in 10 minutes. For that first 9, you were an idiot user. So, yeah. And her job title, she's actually community manager of Puppet Labs. So, she kind of polices the community and keeps it up and going. But yeah, and so next week we'll talk about some of the actual sessions I went to and sprinkle in a few more interviews.
Awesome. Well, that's the tease, the first part of LinuxCon, where we had our very first man on the floor in the form of Seth Anderson, the representative of Everyday Linux. And I want to kick off our news section talking about what I was just talking about of learning. We're not in the days anymore where you can just be a guy who picks stuff up. Yes, those jobs are still out there, but now you're the unusual guy. You used to be every guy was just the guy who picks stuff up on his own. Now people expect you to know stuff. They expect you to have information. They expect you to have certifications. Well, Linux Foundations has introduced a bunch of new certifications.
Yes, they are the Linux Foundation Certified Sysadmin and the Linux Foundation Certified Engineer. And we'll link to a story. ZDNet covered this. They actually unveiled it. And if you went to the con, it was kind of cool. He said, now feel under your seats. And they had taped a paper there with a 25% off code for certification tests. So, so when I get around to taking one, I'll have that 25% off code to go after it the first time. And the cool thing about these, I talked to them a little bit about these. They didn't know why I was asking so many questions. But the Linux Plus and the other one, the LPIC
level 1.
Yeah, LPIC level 1. Those are for the most part multiple choice, or as a lot of people like to say, multiple guess. You have to know, and they try to trick you and make them tough, but it turns out that is it A, B, C, or D, or is it which one is the least incorrect, or pick 2, or whatever. So there's a certain amount. If you're just a good guesser, you could possibly pass those. The Linux Foundation, they're focusing more hands-on doing the thing instead of just saying how would you do it. They're like, do it. And so there's a lot more simulations, and you're actually doing the actual things that need to be done rather than answering questions about them. And I want to say I emailed Anthony about this, and I said, "Hey, Anthony, have you heard of the new certifications? And are you working on aligning the Linux Academy certs with them?" And he responded back, and he's very attentive. I didn't send him this email until a few hours ago, and he's like, "Hi, Seth. The short answer is yes and yes. From the looks of all of the content required for the first Linux Foundation cert is also covered by Linux Plus. It looks as though the sysadmin one is not nearly as in-depth. However, even though we cover it all, we are going to be launching a prep course for each one of these certs here in the near future. So I want to talk to you about Linux Academy, the Anthony I was speaking with. They offer you step-by-step video courses to help a beginner all the way through a power user become a Linux admin, to help you run, manage, configure, set up, and keep running Linux kernels to prepare for a certification, but not just a certification to make you a paper tiger, to actually teach you how to do the exact same things you would be doing in your job. When you join, you get your own Linux Lab server that runs on the Amazon cloud. You can choose from any one of 8 different distros. You could even redo the same lesson in different distros because sometimes they do them a little different. There are PDF study guides with reference sheets. They time code those to the videos they go about. There's like about 200 different training videos. You can even do a lesson browser where you can just go in and pick, oh, I want to pick that one, or I want to pick this one. Or you can organize kind of a chart or a track that you want to go through, as well as they have quizzes. There's even Linux Academy for Teams if you're like want to do something has a department or a school. And if you're bandwidth impaired like I am, you can even do a DVD for offline viewing. And you know, okay, just to let you know, if you're like, I'm cheap, I don't want to pay any money, I'm not going to do this, fine. Go on YouTube, find some videos. Good luck on knowing if those videos are related, if they're even done by smart people or just hacks, if they're the current version. Go be a part of forums and read wikis, and you can find all this information. What you're paying for at the Linux Academy are people whose jobs it is to run and configure Linux. And then you can sign up 7 days for $1. It's a 7-day trial. You sign up, you go through, do a few lessons, see if it's for you. If you like it, I know you'll like it. I pay for this, and I don't pay for anything. You can do $20 a month. If you sign up for a 6-month block, you can do 1 month for $25, or for a super savings, $199 for a year. That comes out to be like $17 a month. Go online, try to find a boot camp, try to find prices at other places that don't ask you for email and marketing list spam to just start flooding you about this. Guys, you're not going to find a better deal on learning Linux. And again, these aren't just going to assume. So many of those labs and boot camps that you go to, if you're going to get anything out of them, you already need to be an expert. If you want to get something out of the Linux Academy, if you know how to watch YouTube, if you know how to watch a YouTube video, you have the prerequisites to start the Linux Academy. You can go at your own pace, and if you don't understand something, you're not holding up the rest of the class. You can replay it 2 or 3 times, and you can understand it. They are quick to respond if you have questions, if you have concerns, if you don't understand. There's a community that has grown up around the Linux Academy that will bring you along, and you can become a Linux admin. You won't become a command line godfather overnight, but you can become a Linux admin however fast you want to. You can take a few months, you can take a whole year. If you'll just stick with it, and if you will invest in it, this is the best return for your training education dollars I have ever come across online for technical things like this.
And it's not just Linux. It's Amazon Web Services. It's OpenStack. It's as they said, they're going to be aligning themselves with these new standards. When things change, the Linux Academy changes with it. They're very proactive as well as reactive. They react quickly, but they don't always have to react because sometimes they're leading the charge. And when you sign up, use the referral code EverydayLinux to let them know that Seth sent you there.
Yeah.
It's a good place to go.
All right, we now have the command line Godfather seal of approval, and
Definitely.
we'll move on. The next bit of news: Mobile OS's security sandbox approach flawed. Now, this is interesting. Both Android and iOS have touted the fact that everything is sandbox, and that's the root of their security. Linux Insider says, maybe not.
Yes, this was an interesting story when I came across it today. The Android GUI framework lets university researchers hack into applications with up to a 92% success rate. They tested apps from Gmail, H&R Block, Newegg, WebMD, Chase Bank, Hotels.com, and Amazon. So, these might not be apps everybody has, but, WebMD, that's important stuff. Chase Bank, Hotels.com. These are not fly-by-night organizations. They've been around for a while. I don't understand exactly how they do it, but it's like because you're letting this memory run in the background, it assumes something else is running in the foreground, and based on some algorithms of how they work, they're able to detect what the other memory is doing, even though it was sandboxed. And like for Amazon, because of how Amazon worked, they couldn't. They can only work 48% of the time, but Gmail, 92% of the time, they could figure out what was going on in Gmail. 86% of the time with Newegg. So it was
just to give a little more layman's terms, it's called a side channel attack, meaning you're not attacking the app, you're not attacking the data, you're attacking what the app does, and you're monitoring it. So basically, they're building essentially a rainbow table. They're saying, I'm in the Gmail app. When I do this, I see X happening. When I do this, I see Y happening. When I do this, I see Z happening. They build this table, having access to the Gmail app, being intimately familiar with how it works by doing it. Everything they do, they make note of what happens in the memory. Once they build that table, they can now look at what's going on in the memory and infer what's happening in the app.
Yeah,
right.
But the thing was, they weren't doing it from within the Google app. They were doing it from within a different framework, and that's what the big deal was of this story. Again, it was a very interesting read.
Right, so that you still have to interact with the app to build your database.
Right.
And then you build a second app that just watches what's going on. And so, you built your database by interacting with an app. So basically what they're saying is, by using an app, you can know what the app does. Yes, this is a true statement. But they're clever about how they're extracting information. And it is very clever. And
very much.
I don't know that this can be fixed, short of, don't share memory. And that makes everything less efficient, because as it is right now, there's one pool of RAM. If a system says, I need it, and my app doesn't need it, it'll just be released and given to that app. Now you're going to have to declare RAM and say, this is mine, it's encrypted, nobody else can use it, which will mean you can do less with the same amount of RAM.
Right.
Yeah, and apparently Newegg, they expect the fix to be out next week. They say they're going to fix the vulnerability in Android first, and then iOS. I would kind of reckon it's sort of like a buffer overflow is to the OS. This kind of is to the apps that run. Again, I don't know how they would secure it, but just
it'll just force apps to be a lot more proactive about their memory management. They're going to have to clean their own. They're going to release RAM more aggressively. They're going to have to have better garbage collection. They're going to have to code better, plain and simple.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that makes that it's just going to make the entry level for coding for Android and iOS a little higher, because people are going to have to know those extra steps.
And a lot of people won't do it. The app mills, you can go online and build your own fart app. That's not going to get better. And so then there will be a class of easily hacked and a class of less easily hacked apps in the world.
Yeah, although I hope the fart apps are on the less easily hacked, because I want my fart data private.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe the poop log app. Hopefully that one will be coded more securely as well.
Yeah, that would be important. Okay, next one, Trouble in Trollville. I just love that article title. There's trouble in Trollville, my friends. A venture capital firm laid off some folks.
Oh,
yes,
no.
Yeah, Intellectual Ventures, which is the largest, most well-known IP troll out there, has laid off 140 workers, basically about 20% of its employees. Now, of course, they put the spin on it and say, we just had those employees when we were setting up. Now we're ready to go and don't need them. But this might have something to do with the fact that they've lost a couple of cases they were thinking they were going to win, and some Supreme Court decisions maybe made patent software a little bit harder. So anyway, I hope it's bad news for trolls and not just their business is more mature, so they don't need all the startup labor.
I love this quote straight out of the marketing department. Intellectual Ventures creates a market for invention, allowing inventors to reap cash from their ideas. Yeah, that's what you do.
Exactly it.
Oh, all right. We all know how much I hate software patents, so let's not even go down that road. Let's look again. Most people download 0 apps per month. I probably blow that curve, but not by a lot. I mean, I don't download apps all the time.
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting story. Apps represent approximately 52% of time spent with digital media in the U.S., and that's up from like 40% in early 2013. And Apple has boasted 75 billion all-time App Store downloads, but yet it finds that the average smartphone user, over 65%, download 0 apps per month. Only about 1/3 of smartphone owners download any apps. The top 7% of smartphone owners account for nearly half of all download activity in a given month. Well, you think about that. Most people have their apps, and they use the apps they have, and they don't really add new ones. So, and if they do add a new one, it's usually, some whatever game went viral, Angry Flatbirds or whatever.
Yeah, and the 0 apps a month. That's a mathematical quirk, right? 100 million people, 1 million apps. That ends up being 0 apps per month.
Right.
And so I downloaded an app just today, and deleted it 5 minutes later. So it also you got to look at your net gain. I often download apps just to see what they're about, check them, see if they're worthwhile, and then they go away. There are probably 6 apps that I interact with on a regular basis on my phone, and the rest of them are just things I use once in a while.
See, on my phone, I think I download. I'd have to double check.
You're still a noob, though, Chris. This whole smart thing is still new to you.
Yeah, the phone part, yes, I will agree. The phone part, yes. But I've had tablets for a while now. But I still pull apps and burn apps just as fast as what you're describing, Mark, almost more than, because I'm trying to find more reasons to use my phone more or the tablet more. What I'm finding out myself is that I'm specializing each device. So my phone has certain apps on it that aren't on my other tablet or any of the other devices I own. So a lot of it is the phone is easy enough. It's my playground phone. I play with the phone to find out what apps I want to try on the tablet and which ones stay on the phone. But I probably do 2 to 3 a month easily.
All right, and this ties into the next story of app rot, letting an app go and just letting it die of inattention.
Well, and and the story here is kind of how the whole model of the App Store is like the top 25 list, or the 10 best of this or whatever. And if you don't make that list, then nobody ever hears of your app. So it's like you have this very small sliver of profitable, known-worthy apps. Candy Crush, stuff like that. Facebook, whatever. And then there's this very even smaller sliver of like the middle class apps, and then most everything is out in the ghettoville that nobody's ever heard of, and there's no way to search for it. this is just a quote from the OS News story, as the economics get tighter, it becomes much harder to support the lavish treatment that developers have given apps in the past, such as full-time staffs, offices, pixel-perfect custom designs of every screen, frequent free updates, and completely different iPhone and iPad interfaces. So, there might be a need to change the App Store model. Even if the change is a better way to sort and find stuff, because the search function, especially in the Apple Store, I found the Google Play Store to be slightly more searchable, but in the Apple Store, the first couple of hits are vaguely related to what I typed out, and then the other things are just whatever the retarded monkey threw in the pot to round out the search.
What's the word? A contributing factor of this is the tremendous redundancy of apps in the market. So if you type in flashlight app in Android, you're going to find tens of thousands of apps that all turn on an LED, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is one app feeds ad revenue to this guy and another app feeds ad revenue to that guy. So a lot of the reason that only a few apps are highlighted is because only a few apps are worth highlighting.
Right. And the other problem I always see with apps, and I'll pick on podcast catchers for the first one, because it's been my current bane of my existence, is their feature set seems to be every other release is broken. I had for a long time I was using Podcast Addicts, and it was great, and I loved it because I could background task it and it'd play. But then all of a sudden it broke, and it never got fixed, so I moved off to a different one. And none of them support even the same subset of features, like background playlists or manipulation of your playlist without having to have the app full screen. It's just amazing how widely different each app, even if they're in the same genre, how widely different every app is.
Beyond Pod. It cost $8, but it's worth it. Beyond Pod. Has widgets that let you do stuff without launching the full app. Got a lock screen widget by default. Beyond Pod.
I'll look at Beyond Pod. That's probably the only one I haven't checked recently, because I went through and Podcast Catcher and I installed every single one and just looked at each one independently.
I never looked back from Beyond Pod. Now I know a lot of people like Dog Catcher or Gpotter because they're more geeky set. It sounds to me like you're like me. I just want to be presented by podcast and let me play them and get the UI out of my way. Beyond Pod. Okay. There's a free ad there. See, we do that all the time. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this the last link in the show. Munich, the much vaunted, much ballyhooed Munich transition from Windows to Linux may be backtracking a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Yes, German media is reporting that the city is now considering a switch back to Microsoft in response to some complaints they've been getting. Schmidt, who's deputy mayor of the CSU party, says he describes two of them. The first is the issue of compatibility. Users in the rest of Germany that use Microsoft software have had trouble with the files generated by Munich's open source applications. And the second is price. Schmidt saying that the city now has the impression that Linux is very expensive due to custom programming. And Schmidt is also basically an Outlook fan. Boo-hoo. Linux doesn't have Outlook. I'm so sorry. And then Schmidt is echoing the mayor of the SPD party, and then I'm just going to basically jump down. I'm going to read the last paragraph. Microsoft announced last year that it was moving its German headquarters to Munich. This move is planned to take place in 2016. While Ritter was involved in the deal that precipitated the move and describes himself as a Microsoft fan, he says the criticism of Linux, which is their kind of flavor, is unrelated. So basically, Microsoft somehow made him some money and involved him in the deal, and he loves Microsoft, but that's not the reason he's criticizing Linux. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. They do. There are valid points there. File incompatibility, and you do have to custom. If you want it to be exactly like Windows, yes, you have to do some custom coding there. That's one of the things that has plagued every transition between OSs, whether it's Linux or I've seen schools go from Windows to Mac and schools go from Mac to Windows. Most of your time and effort is spent making the new thing exactly like the old thing.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Which is stupid.
Exactly. Yeah. If the old thing was what you wanted, stick with the old thing. I've seen not lots, but I've seen a number of schools switch from Mac to Windows because Apple stopped giving laptops away like they did in the early 90s. And the buying the high-end machines became unsustainable, so they switched to Windows, and they spend all their time saying, how can I make my Windows machine more like a Mac? Well, don't. Just be a Windows machine. And then in my own school, I began the transition of moving from Windows to Linux, and it was halted by, a decision maker who outranked me because I couldn't make it exactly like Windows. Well, it's not supposed to be. It's a different thing. And I used to tell people all the time that nobody complains when you pay money for the pain of transition. When you move from Windows to Mac and it costs you more, nobody complains. But for some reason, a free pain is less valuable than a paid pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things
and
that you'll never understand.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: if they switch back, now they're going to have to do a lot of custom programming to get back to the way it was. You can't just delete that programming. There's still going to be upgrades because they were running Windows NT when they switched. I mean, go from Windows NT, fire up a machine running Windows NT, and then run Windows 8, and tell me they're the exact same thing. Oh my gosh!
And so they're going to have to go through the pain of change again. But since it's an expensive pain this time, there won't be complaints.
Well, it'd be a really expensive change because they're going to have to pay for all the licensing for every machine again.
Yep.
So.
And the idea is somehow they're spending more money on customizing their code than they will spend on buying licenses, only if Microsoft is giving out licenses, which sounds entirely possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
I mean,
it sounds
why
like
else?
they're getting bought back.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft says, "Hey, we're opening up a company here, so that's jobs, that's revenue, that's tax base. Why don't you run our stuff too?"
Basically, Microsoft got tired of reading articles about Munich, and said, "We will do whatever it takes to reverse this trend. And if we have to give you free site licenses of all our software, we will do it to make these articles go away." That's my reading of this article.
Or deep discounts.
Yeah.
I read it as deep discounts. Like the $5 a seat type discount.
Yeah, $5 for OS and Office Suite.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how I read it, because they won't give it away for nothing. But if they can say, "Oh, look, we'll give you $5 a seat," people are it's gonna happen, and it's silly, but.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, who knows what went on behind the, in the back rooms that we don't know about. But I mean, man, it just seems fishy. It just seems fishy.
And being a guy who hates Linux and loves Windows, I'm super excited about this. I'm glad to see this. Thank you for bringing this article to my attention, Seth.
Mark, I don't want to lie to people. You made me put this in. I told me I'd never.
You are banned from the show unless you bring me some Windows-loving news. All right, and to continue the All Seth All the Time show, what has happened this week in history, Seth?
Okay, this was a really interesting story. August the 23rd, 1990, Tim Berners-Lee opened the World Wide Web to new users.
Ooh.
So he opened the floodgates, 1990, 24 years ago.
So the internet still wasn't open to new users. It took a little while longer, but the web was, meaning the universities for the most part. But it didn't reach the homes until like 91, 92, just shortly thereafter, when famously Al Gore opened the internet to the public. But yeah, the web was a thing, but it was an infant thing.
Yeah,
right.
It was.
Looking ahead at your tip of or link of the week, Seth, let's go ahead and jump there, because it is certainly related to what the web looked like in 1990 versus what it did today.
Yeah, I thought this was an interesting article when I came across it. It's just it's from The Verge. You can check out what the first generation of your favorite website looked like. And as you scroll down, like the first one you come to is Reddit. Well, Reddit's only been around since 2005. As you click over the picture, your scroller, your mouse becomes a dividing line, and on the left side is what it looked like opening day, and on the right side is what it looks like today. So if you scroll all the way over to the right, you see the original web page, and if you scroll all the way over to the left, that's what it looks like today. Yahoo, a very old and storied website, came out in '96. On the right and on the left, you can see Nintendo, everything, McDonald's, NBA, and Google. Just a lot of them on there. You can go through and take a look and see.
Metafilter look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yep.
Google, I don't know, I haven't seen it on this list yet, but you compare Google today to Google then, pretty much the exact same. A white page with a bar.
Yeah, there's actually less on it today than there was then. So, but yeah, AOL, another one that came out.
Oh, whitehouse.gov in 1997. Man, that right there.
Yep.
Is the ultimate example of what websites looked like back then. It was a tiling, nonsensical background, a banner. All it needed is a blinking text on it somewhere.
Or the construction sign.
Yeah, maybe the White House Virtual Library was blinking because this is just a snapshot.
Yeah.
But
eBay looks pretty much the same. New York Times looks largely the same. It got bigger.
Yahoo surprises me though, out of all of them, because I forgot how clean Yahoo was.
Yeah, it was just a list of links back then. That's all.
Yeah. That surprises me. That one does. I forgot. You know, it's amazing when you look back at these and you go, oh my God, I remember that.
Oh, I bemoaned the changes at Yahoo when they changed. Oh my gosh.
Because Yahoo didn't used to be a search engine; it was a directory where users directly added their own stuff. A lot of people listening to the show may not know that. You could browse the directory. Later, they added a search function, but it did not index the web. You had to, as a person, go and say, I am adding this to this section. So you had to categorize your website. Is it in the media section, or is it in the entertainment section, or and they were broad section. Then you dive those down. It was a card catalog of the internet.
Yep.
Google came along and said, we're not going to index anything. We're just going to search everything and just present it to you. And Alta Vista was doing that, and before Google.
WebCrawler. Yeah. WebCrawler was actually the first one, I think.
WebCrawler didn't make any ranking. It was just the first one I came to is the first one you get. Alta Vista was the first to try to match the value of your ranking, and then Google said, we're going to match the value of the page. That was what made Google special. It's not about how many keywords we can hit. It's about how good the page is. And that's still their niche.
I loved Alta Vista, man. That was my favorite.
Yeah. Back in the day, Dogpile searched Alta Vista and Yahoo and Google and a bunch of others.
Yep.
Back in the day, you could tell what kind of person somebody was by what search engine they used. What's your search engine? Yahoo? Noob.
Yeah.
What surprises me is Dogpile actually is still online.
It is. Yeah.
It is.
Doing the same things.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing, and there's an app for it.
Of course, there's always an app for that. I forget that there are such things as search apps because I've had Google now for over a year, and I just talk to my phone. I don't search anymore. I just talk to it.
Google Now changes everyone's life when they embrace the Google. It's over.
Just drink the Kool-Aid.
That's
all right, Chris. What have you got for us this week? Of course, it has to do with your favorite SteamOS.
It does. This is a breakdown from the Tech National News. It's a breakdown and comparison between the Steam box and all of the next generation consoles. It's kind of entertaining when you go down and you read the differences between each of the, from the Steam box to how it compares to the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One, and how in just specs alone, some of the stuff is just like, what surprised me is how low end some of those video game consoles are.
Yeah.
it just blows my mind. And then to hear that the benchmarks on the Steam box are over and above what a lot of the other ones are, and it's mind-boggling. But it's over at like I said, Tech National News, and they break it down pretty well that it's not geek speak, and you could pretty much follow it even if you don't know what some of the pieces are. It's just it's a really good comparison.
So Steam is essentially a high-end PC, whereas currently Xbox One and PS4 are moderate PCs with specialized code. So it's up to the game developers to write to their hardware. Steam's taking the opposite approach. We will design hardware that can handle whatever you throw at it.
Pretty much, and that's been that way for many years. The same game, when they do a multi-system release, you can tell the ones that have a little bit more inside the consoles that are, because of the quality of the graphics. The one game that I always bring people to, because it was a big classic and it still is for some people, the Borderlands series. I have friends that were diehard Borderlands fans on the Xbox. And when I started playing it on my game PC, and they'd come over and watch me play, and they'd be like, mine doesn't look anything like that. What is that stuff? What is that?
Yeah.
And it was just, they were like, that's not even Borderlands. That's a different game. And it's going to be that much more in everyone's living room now. And so I'm really excited for when that actually gets released. I'm chewing my nails.
To play the wet blanket a little bit, maybe the Steam box has to have more processing power because of the overhead that Steam puts into it, because they're not playing native code. They're running it through their emulator, so to speak.
Well, no, a lot of it is native code. The Steam is an app store basically.
Right, but it all has to run on their Steam OS, right, which is Linux, and these other things aren't Linux. So they've got to have some sort of abstraction layer between Linux and the game that's not designed to run on Linux.
From what I'm reading, a lot of the games are being rewritten. There are some that are getting wrappers around them, and those are going to always perform like garbage. But there are a lot of the games that are Steam OS certified are native code.
Okay.
So
that means that Steam is a big enough player now that people are writing to it.
Yeah.
And that's why there aren't a lot of AAA titles on Steam right now, because Titanfall isn't going to write to Steam. Not yet.
No, they're not yet. But what'll happen is when this hits the shelves, and I'm really hoping that everybody goes out and buys one, because it's going to change the environment immensely. And I have a feeling that once that happens, a lot of the AAA titles will immediately get moved over.
Exciting stuff if you're a hardcore gamer.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Competition is always a good thing. I believe that, no matter what it is. And we know that there is competition for podcasts out there. We know that we are competing for your time, and that when you sit down here and listen to a 7-hour podcast, you're taking away from your Audible.com book or your other podcasts. And we thank you for that. And because we value your time, we also value your input. And so if you've got something to say about these topics or about anything else, elementop.com is the place to go there. Click the Contact Us button at the top of the page. Send us an email directly at edl@elementop.com. Or if you want to have your very own voice on the show, you can leave us a voicemail on our Google Voice line at 559-IMOP, free anywhere in North America. Or you can just send me a file and I'll play it. But we do also, don't forget about our forums, where you can ask questions and get answers. We can only answer a handful of things here, but our community responds in the forum. So it's not just us. You hear from everybody. So we encourage you to do that. All of that can happen over at elementop.com, and we appreciate your time. And Seth, Chris, as always, I appreciate your time and work for making me look so good every week for doing so little.
Maybe we try.
It takes a lot of work to make me look good.
It was a Seth show to this week, though, so great for you, Seth.
Yeah, I even took down my face thing just to make y'all look better.
That's right. Yeah, he doesn't have his big windscreen, so the people watching the video, we apologize. Next week, I think we're going to do a more philosophical topic, based on an email I got actually during this show. And so the guys don't even know about it. But I think we're going to talk about file sharing / privacy, piracy. And
Are we not going to do
What?
LinuxCon Part 2?
well, I thought we'd come back to that. We'd space them in a week there.
Okay.
Do you want to do them back to back?
It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I just figure since
Nothing
the
I say
conference-
here actually binds anything in stone. I may totally forget this, but a listener brought up an interesting idea about not just the legality but the ethics of sharing, right? And we've talked about that concept before, but I just think it would be interesting to have a discussion about when is it wrong to share, and when is it right to share. So anyway, that's my thinking right now for next week's show. All of that could change between now and next week. You'll have to tune in next week to find out what we actually do talk about, because for now, that ends this episode of Everyday Linux.
Bye-bye.
Arg, see ya.
Arg me hearties. Ye be pirates, Chris.
Arg, that I am, sir.
No beard.
If you can dodge a ranch, you can dodge a ball.
Steve the pirate. You know,
That's right.
dresses like a pirate. No, I don't know
We have a
who-
guy that dresses like a pirate?
Steve the pirate.
I had to. We were talking
I-
about you
I
were bringing
wa-
up the
that was
sharing
on-
thing.
That was on while I was in Chicago, so of course I watched
Oh,
it
yeah.
that night.
It's one of those that I find myself drifting to like once a month. Just late at night, I'm going to put that one on. If I don't watch all of it, that's fine. Let's just let it play in the background. I'm not a lesbian. I'm bisexual. Called that one.
Dodgeball dancers. It's good, clean entertainment content.
He will not be able to see with that blindfold on, Cotton. Bold move. Oh, good stuff. All right, nobody listening, nobody to say goodbye to. We'll see you live stream.